Hey, how's it going? Hey everyone. Welcome back. I'm acting like I'm caught off guard. I'm not. Welcome back everyone. I'm so excited to be here. I'm pulling up the runner show for today, y'all. I'm really excited for our second month meeting and excited to really be in community with the folks you see on your screen tonight. Um, I wanted to begin, of course, as I did um, last time with first. I'm going to. I'm going to just introduce the people on the screen. I'm just going to say them by name, and then as we get to their portion of the program, have them speak for themselves. For those who don't know, I'm Nijeeah Gadsden. I run the Charleston Activist Network. I'm most active on Instagram, and I'm least active on Facebook. And also joining us tonight is Khalid. Khalid is our moderator, and hopefully our forever moderator with the book club, and of course returning from last month. Also, we have a very special guest that again we'll get to them in a little bit, but I wanted to say we have Nijeeah Richardson here with us, and I'm so excited to hear their presentation today and their thoughts and reflections. And of course, shout out to our ASL interpreter, Courtney. And so I just wanted to just introduce them on the screen, and then also start with a land and labor acknowledgement. I want us to just right now, as the book club's community agreement has stated, this is a very special place where we're centering the voices of Black people, specifically BIPOC people more extensively, but we really want to center the experience and the voices of Black and Gullah Geechee descendants here. And we also want to pay homage to those who've come before us. I want to right now offer you to reflect and think about the land on which we are all sitting on, which is stolen land. I want you, if you can, please think of, say out loud to yourselves, or drop in the comment section the name of the Native community or tribe that you believe that the land you sit on once belonged to. Please, I wanted you to just list them by name, list all of the tribes in our area, whose land we benefit from, whose labor we benefit from. And also want you to say the name and think of and reflect on the name of an ancestor. Perhaps you met one in your reading. I would like for you to reflect on names of folks. For me, I'm thinking of the Emmanuel Nine. And I'm thinking of my great-grandfather, Enoch Gadsden. I'm thinking of my father's family and his mothers and grandmothers. Thank you so much. Just wanted to just acknowledge those who've come before us. Yeah, so I'll move along in the agenda. Yeah, thank you, Dee, for listing the Kuso tribe. Encouraging you all to continue to use the comment section to interact with us here. That's the best way to do it, especially as we go through the questions and have this conversation. The next item on our agenda, I want to introduce my co-moderator, Khalid. I want to take this time right now, and I'm so sorry. Khalid, I'm going to ask you to introduce yourself and also kind of give an explanation, I guess, of your role with us, and just kind of explain why you're here, why it was important for you to be here as moderator specifically, and then we'll transition to our featured speaker.
Hey everyone, I'm Khalid. I'm a Charleston native. Um, I've always had a love for reading books, especially things like historical fiction and historical other nonfiction books. But after the uprisings, uh, back in May, and kind of towards the end of April, I just became very interested again in more things like Black literature and the telling of uh, the historically accurate history, especially in Charleston. So I remember seeing Mika at an event, and we were talking about this. So once she had, announced that she was doing this, I kind of like jumped at the chance to say that, hey, if there's anything, I really didn't even expect to be a moderator. I was like, if there's anything to help, I'm ready to join. But when she asked me, I said yes, and it's really important just to be able to share uh, the Charleston perspective and a lot of what's happened, especially in the past 5 to 10 years. So I'm excited to be here once again.
Thank you, Khalid. I appreciate it. And I just wanted people to hear your voice. And I really wanted to also decolonize the way we kind of discuss books. I think, and I'm a fan of more academic and I guess maybe scholarly book discussions, but I'm also a fan of making it accessible. And so I just think it's important just for people to hear your voice and know about your passion for reading and reading books that center the Black experience here in the South. I want to, before I introduce Nijeeah, I keep like drum rolling them and like da da da. But before I introduce Nijeeah, I want to say this. It's important. Why I chose the Charleston syllabus was, I think just like Denmark BC's Garden, this should be required reading. This is an anthology edited specifically following the Mother Emanuel tragedy. And because the conversations about race, not just here in Charleston, but throughout the country at that moment, according to the editors, lacked nuance and it lacked a certain level of scholarship, Black scholarship. And so it was important to choose something that helps us contextualize not just what happened 5 years ago, but help us kind of put things like the Calhoun Monument coming down, the recent committees created by the city of Charleston, our current presidential race and whatnot. It helps us put that all into context, and it also features works of people who have long been forgotten. I think what this anthology does, it shows us what's deliberately or what sometimes it just as a function of white supremacy, what's left out of the canon, what's left out of our schools, what's left out of our colleges. And so this is a great time for people to really get to know a myriad of Black voices who've been doing this work for ages, not just new contemporary voices. And so that being said, I thought it was important to have, like Khalid being a native to Charleston, I wanted Nijeeah to come forward as my friend and someone I really revere and respect, who does amazing work in our community, especially in the LGBTQ community and with our youth. I wanted Nijeeah to reflect on the experiences of being Black and in Charleston, being from here, like as she mentioned before we came live, being here before, during, and after. And I wanted Nijeeah to share those reflections. So Nijeeah, please take it away.
Wow, thank you for that introduction. That was very kind. I appreciate it. So yeah, I'm really excited to be here and to talk about my experience. And specifically, I sort of want to start with some grounding and setting the tone for what is to come and what I'm going to talk about regarding the Mother Emanuel. So if anyone watches Lovecraft Country and is is into Afrofuturism and science fiction, I'm not as huge into nonfiction, but I think it's very important. But I love science fiction. I love reading Octavia Butler, things like that. Lovecraft Country is amazing. And so the last episode 7, there's this quote that's read during the scene, or heard during the scene. And I was just like, what is this quote? And so I looked it up, and it's amazing. It's by jazz artist Sun Ra, and it's from the 1974 film, Space is the Place. And it reads, "I'm not real, I'm just like you. You don't exist in this society. If you did, your people wouldn't be seeking equal rights. You're not real. If you were, you'd have some status among the nations of the world. So we're both myths. I do not come to you as a reality. I come to you as the myth, because that's what Black people are, myths. I came from a dream that the Black man dreamed a long time ago. I'm actually a presence sent to you by your ancestors." So I wanted to read this because I think it coincides with the impact of Mother Emanuel, and in my personal experience, I feel, I know, in the society that we live in, Black people, our lives, our deaths, our love, our experiences, our murder is often mythologized. It's all often seen as a myth, as well as symbolic, not really felt, not really heard, not really seen. And so, with all of that being said, the day that I found out about about the shooting at Mother Emanuel, I was working at a daycare, and this daycare had a specific culture. Most of the people that worked there were Black women who were from Charleston, Gullah Geechee people. And then there were a few white teachers who ran the older classes, and there's a whole thing about that. But yeah, it's very Charleston to say that. So I learned of the shooting and obviously was devastated. My family was devastated. I was living with them at the time. And I kept waiting to receive a text, from my job, like, okay, we're gonna cancel work, because in my mind, this is like 9/11, like locally, right? This is terrorism on the people that, we know, and we love, and in church, to say the least. And we're in the heart of the Bible Belt, right? So what? But at last, the text never came, the email never came. I show up at work and everything is the same. Everyone is smiling. No one's talking about what happened. I'm furious. I'm confused. Even I feel like the Black people that work there are quiet about it. And if you're from Charleston, there's a silencing of Black people that is, it's so pervasive and invasive, and it's intense. But anyway, so like we never talked about it pretty much. And then finally there's like the nap time, and that's when all the teachers get together, Black teachers, we all talk. And finally there's like, we're feeling it with each other. We're talking about the devastation of this and how could this happen? But clearly we can't talk about this or show our anger in front of the white people who work there, who are in leadership positions. So it was just very interesting to experience that in that time and place and in that setting. That would seem, I think, to most people like, what? And it's like, no, that probably mimics, kind of the setting that you were in, especially like if you're a white person, think about where you were and how you were talking about this, and if you were feeling it, and were you talking about it in a way that was symbolic? Was it a hashtag of Charleston Strong, or were you feeling it? Were you grieving? Because I was mourning. The people around me that I knew were mourning when they could and where they could. And so also, I think what was really interesting and hurtful about that experience was, just a few months before then, in April, the shooting of Walter Scott happened. And the response of the community was, Charleston Strong, look at us. We're exceptional in the fact that like we have kept our Black people docile and not rioting, not Instead, we're holding hands, you know, marching across bridges. And then the exact same response comes, you know, a few months later in the wake of the massacre at Mother Emanuel. And it's just so fascinating that that is the response, and that's what you know, Charleston glorifies itself on being a place where mourning, there's no room for anger in mourning and in grieving. There's no room for really recognizing the humanity, the beauty in Black people, in our struggle, our oppression that we've overcome, as well as, you know, still living and existing. So yeah, that was my experience here in Charleston during that time.
Thank you, Nijeeah. And I think it was, you know, when you talk about how you expected maybe the world to kind of come to a screeching halt, that's exactly, it's so funny. It felt like a delayed reaction, a delayed, it hit me even delayed. I remember I was at the gym in the morning. I think I went to bed late at night, saw something really quick on the news, but thought it was an accident on Calhoun. Woke up, and then I went to the gym very early, and I'm like, wow, they're still on Calhoun. And, you know, nothing around me stopped. And I compare it to, I was on a college campus. I was in undergrad when 9/11 happened. And I remember I'm in Jersey City. So we're literally just like, we can see the Twin Towers from campus. Literally everything stopped. Like, and then all you could hear was sirens, and all you could feel was everyone being terrified, and you could start to smell things. And it was just such a sensorial experience, but juxtaposed that experience with what happened here. And you saying that kind of made me, I just thought about that. I just thought about how slow, like, it started to impact the city. So I want to say thank you for sharing those reflections. And I think it's important for people to understand from your perspective what it was like, and how, like, this slow, like, metabolizing of racial things, that's something that's very unique to Charleston too, I think. I think white folks are looking at us to see how we're going to react. And then I think Black folks, we're looking like, you know, again, or wow, or like we're dealing with trauma. We're dealing with so many complicated feelings. And I think it just, there's something about that slow metabolizing of you know, tragedies like this. Thank you so much for offering your thoughts. And where can people find you? You know, where can people reach out to you?
You can find me, you can email me at nijeeahr@waf.org. I'm also on Instagram, but it's kind of a personal Instagram, you know, and boundaries.
No, don't offer that. Exact boundaries are important. But, you know, I'll lift up the work that you do at We Are Family. You, Cora, the whole gang. Y'all are amazing. We Are Family is gang gang. So definitely lift you up. So
yeah, you can follow We Are Family's Instagram and Facebook. You can also find me on Facebook. That's not as personal.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it, and stay in touch. And your book is coming.
Thank you.
All right. Take care. And okay, I got my glasses on, so that means I gotta read the agenda, Khalid, and we're gonna hop in. And the next thing I wanted to do was hop into the prepare everyone who is watching live, prepare y'all for the Q&A. This is where I am going to encourage you all to just submit questions, be active in the comment section. But also, you should have received, hey, Carmen Clark, you should have received the newsletter featuring the questions that Khalid curated. And so, Khalid, we're at your part of the agenda where I want you to first talk about the thought process of the questions you curated for our discussion tonight. and then I'll have you read the first question, and then we'll again make sure you guys use the comment section so we can pull those questions and kind of have a conversation. Okay.
Yeah. So I don't know if you or even if any of the viewers right now, if y'all read the introduction section in books, but I do. And, I was just paying attention to the part where it talks about themes. So like how the book is broken up thematically. So I wanted to make sure that all the questions kind of followed that theme. And at the same time, I wanted to make sure that I related all of the questions to Charleston, since a lot of the readings don't specifically involve specifically, involve Charleston. But I wanted to make sure that one of the questions were broad enough to pull in, different topics and events, situations here in the city, and as well as different readings from the book as well. So my first question is, it kind of goes off what Nijeeah kind of touched on at the end of what she was saying. Since there is a limited space for Black healing and self-care, like wellness spaces, therapy, etc., and Black people often turn to the church and spirituality for healing and self-care, what are the impacts on Black mental health and wellness when white supremacy invades and causes harm in these spaces? And just thinking, just to generate some thought about this question. So think the Mother Emanuel Massacre, think the misconception of voodoo and Santeria and Yoruba and Conjure, and how specifically white supremacy has misconstrued these religions and African spirituality practices. You're muted, Mika.
I'm talking and muted. I just realized that. So yeah. So Leslie's going to curate questions and bring them in. But I wanted to, Khalid, could you hit mute real quick? I'm hearing a little feedback. Okay. And so I wanted to kind of make this a conversation between like Khalid and I, and then we'll bring in any comments there. But people are saying no audio. Oh, my audio. But I think it's important to talk about the church as a sacred space. If the folks can remember last month's, selection, Denmark VC's Garden, we talked about how Mother Emanuel, that's where I learned the more about the story of Mother Emanuel and how that wasn't the first time it felt prey to white supremacy. Of course, following the failed Denmark VC uprising, there were super strict restrictions placed on not just Mother Emanuel. Mother Emanuel was destroyed after that, but the way Black folks went about worshiping, their creator, their God. Those spaces were surveilled. Those spaces were you weren't allowed to worship without surveillance, without chaperones, without white oversight. And I think that in essence, that kind of continued, that practice continued in different ways throughout Charleston. But like I remember I created an event a few years ago called the Conjure Sessions, and I used that name very specifically, kind of mentioning what you were just referencing, Khalid, in terms of a certain spirituality that we practice that's rooted here and in the Black experience. But I also called it secret Black people meeting. So I wouldn't allow any white people to attend. It was only for Black people. And that was a reference to how Black people would meet in sacred, quiet spaces to find community, to create community, and to not just worship, but to disseminate information and to fellowship. And I think that practice, that tradition is something that people still, it resonates with people. But I do wonder if white supremacy has almost destroyed some of those spaces and has made us maybe change the way we look at religion. So when you came up with that question, I'm going to ask you, like, how would you answer that question for yourself? Like, what do you think happened to these spaces?
Well, specifically, there's actually lady, a woman that goes to my church now, and she actually joined our church after Mother Emanuel, and she was going to Mother Emanuel, and she had mentioned she was like she just couldn't step back into that church after what happened, and that was traumatizing for her, and it's traumatizing for a lot of people because there's instances of this throughout the South, especially during Jim Crow era. So when it is traumatizing for people, to go into places where they know that their church sisters or even other family members have been killed in church. And at the same time, when we look at the church as a space for healing and freedom, and white supremacy invades that space, where else is there to go? When we look at places like just like therapy, or like counselors and therapists, other wellness spaces, those aren't in Black communities. So where do Black people have this outlet, to experience healing? And there isn't any. If you look at Charleston, where are you don't see these areas in Black communities.
So where do you think we're going? Because we're going somewhere. Where do you think, the incident involving Dylan Roof, where do you think it's pushed us? Because we definitely, aren't disappearing.
Right. Just to clarify your question.
And not to be, it's just like we have to be. We go someplace. I know that there are still like social spaces like around food,
Right.
around maybe dance here, but it's different than, it's just like the church is kind of losing this grip. I know at least on the peninsula, a lot of the historic Black church have shuttered their doors because of gentrification. And so I don't know what's happening.
And that's what I wanted to say, is that a lot of these spaces are being pushed out of the city, where Black people know that they can, one, buy property, so they can, create these spaces, whether that's a wellness, a fitness space, therapy space, church spaces. But, just to say about that, the wellness spaces aren't in the peninsula anymore. Or there's some, but a lot of it is being pushed out of the peninsula.
It was good to see a couple of weeks ago, the Charleston City paper featured a friend of mine, Ashley Limehouse, who is a Black yoga and spiritual wellness instructor. She's one of at least several I can think of, but I love the fact that they featured her prominently on the cover, and talked about this reckoning that Charleston's having, where there are lack of spaces of self-care. And I think this is the conversation I wanted to have following Mother Emanuel, was let's talk about the trauma that needs to be tended to, both the recent trauma that we just experienced at the hands of Dylan Roof, of course, also the trauma that is coming out of the, we're in the cradle of slavery, coming out of slavery, going into apartheid, desegregated schools, systemic issues, systemic oppression. There's never been a moment where people are really caring for and meeting the needs of Black people. It was a rush to peace, a rush to calmness, but there was no rush to actually treat the trauma or create environmental spaces, create environments where Black people could seek refuge and heal. And it's funny how I think people kind of compartmentalize what Dylan Roof did versus other oppressive and violent systems like the gentrification, right? We kind of put them in silos, and I'm like, no, this is all linked. This is all linked. And if I think I can't remember. I think Trump declared after Dylan Roof came into Mother Emanuel, Trump declared, I think he ran for president the next day, or I might have that flipped. My point being is that I don't think those things are coincidental, and not to say that that Dylan Roof and all that was, but I'm saying that I don't believe in the grand scheme of things. I don't believe it was coincidental. I think white people in general had a specific type of racial grievance. And we started to see, coming out of the Obama administration, we started to see folks really that white lash. And I believe I can make an argument that I feel like Charleston was a place that really showcased like that white lash, that resentment. And I think Dylan Roof was just like, you know, a very just awfully horrific iteration of that. I was gonna hop over to the comments. Go ahead, Khalid. Yeah.
And that's what I just wanted to bring back to the writing of this book as well. Just saying that it was so well written, just showing how not only thematically but chronologically, like how saying that, you know, the massacre of Mother Emanuel, how this happened, and how all of these events literally has caused them to lead up to this. Because as you've said before a lot on your Instagram lives, that this wasn't just, you know, Dylan Roof wasn't just like a loner. You know, he was literally, you know, radicalized by, one, the history, and two, by a lot of these online, you know, dark web spaces where people are still, you know, or that still have these beliefs.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm not on it. Thank you, Jessica. For the day before. Thank you, because I knew it was one happened after the other. I appreciate that. And I think Dee, did you? Yeah, here we go. Dee's question: do you think it works specifically for white supremacy to keep everything? Oh, absolutely. I think too, if we think about Dee, if we think about how they've kept, like, even when it comes to teaching Black history, it's treated like, oh, we have to create a special day for it, right? We have to create, it's supposed to be an extraordinary history as opposed to a part of American history.
Mm-hmm.
It's supplemental. And so I think what that does is it teaches people that still separate and unequal. And also what it does, it creates isolationism. I think to a degree where, you know, we're disconnected. And I think because by virtue of how Black people, and I see Courtney's question, I'm gonna bring that in there, I guess. Yeah. Hey, Courtney. Khalid, can you hit mute? I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I think for Black people, given by virtue of the jobs we perform in society, the professional jobs we hold, we always have to interact in white spaces. We always have to travel into white worlds and occupy. So we hear things, we know what's going on. The silos really don't exist for us. But what happens is white folks aren't forced to view our realities, to view our lived experiences on the same footing as theirs. Elizabeth Roberts, everything in Charleston has to be palatable, to predominantly white tourists. Black anger and sadness. If it isn't profitable, the tourism industry gets got. Look at you, Elizabeth. Look at you. Absolutely. And that's the other thing. Hey, Courtney, this is my girl right here. It's interesting how South Carolina narrative is, look how peaceful our people are without actual investments in healing. So peace is more about control than actual efforts to repair harm, at any cost for reparations that include community healing. That's a good question. I know that the ACLU, which is not a voice of the Black people per se, I know they were more active in the reparations conversation more recently, but that is something I try to lift up, is that whole healing piece in creating safe spaces. I was listening to a presentation by the editors of the Charleston Syllabus where they were talking, I think it was a question that someone had posed to them on a panel discussion about the creation of, or the usefulness of safe spaces on college campuses. And remember, years ago, people were calling people snowflakes and saying college students don't, safe spaces. Back in my day, we used to walk, whatever. We used to walk, in the snow in white supremacy, like whatever. I advocate very strongly for safe spaces and Black-only spaces. Here in Charleston. I think it's essential because I used this example before. I did a Black feminist event, and it was for Black women exclusively. But I had my friend who happened to be white take the pictures, and I had another friend who was helping me with the use of the space. And after the event concluded, my two white friends left, and the Black women said, "I really wish that this was all Black space, because I didn't know who that white girl knew. I didn't know who that white woman knew that could get me in trouble for speaking freely if I wanted to talk about my boss, if I wanted to talk about, my recent experiences here in Charleston." And that stuck with me for years. I'm like, I have to be more mindful about creating safe spaces for Black people, but and of course Black women, because there's so much trauma still there, and there's so much there are so little rights for folks to receive justice, especially in the workplace. So there are huge repercussions for espousing certain views publicly. What's this comment from John Ray Roberts? Charleston's immediate response was to mobilize white supremacy through tourism to invade Black sacred spaces, denying healing through Charleston Strong and recovery narrative. Thank you so much, John Ray Roberts. That's an awesome observation. That hashtag, Khalid, chime in. That hashtag pissed me off. Let me just say that. I was over it.
I can't, it literally, denies, what Black people feel. It literally just puts it away. So when their comments like, see what we do, we like to hold hands, we went over the bridge, like all that stuff, it like and even in like Nijeeah said earlier about how it was like a delay in feeling it. And then I even still feel like I haven't felt it, entirely, especially, I live downtown, but I wasn't downtown at the moment. Mm-hmm. But when I read, the introduction, and he's like, just, they're describing, he sat there, like they're describing it vividly, like he sat there, they welcomed him, and then he shot them into Piggy first, like 9 people. And then, and like how the next day, Charleston is just normal. Like, I mean, like nothing happened.
Nijeeah, like I was on James Island when I heard of the news, so I wasn't downtown, but I was at James Island. And when I tell you, like Nijeeah mentioned, I'm glad you brought that back up for those who might have missed Nijeeah's presentation. The resumption of normal everyday life was so uncanny, and it's like, so now compare that to the George Floyd protests, the uprisings that took place. That was like it largely led by white folk, but that was the most Black people I've seen at an outdoor demonstration in Charleston in my life. Like, the only thing I could think of was pictures of Coretta Scott, leading and other amazing movement work. But I've never seen that in all my life in Charleston. And that was like that slow metabolizing of, is this right? Should we not? I think people, because of all that we've been going through in the past 4 years, people were like, nah, this is not normal. And of course, white political will moves things forward in a very rapid pace. And we saw white political will, meaning that even I'm going to give young white people that power. It's their participation that changed the optics and made people think, because I believe if that was 100%, if it was 100% Black people to the streets, I don't know what the reaction would have been. But because it was so diverse, to me, Charleston didn't handle it the way that it typically does. And that slow metabolizing, I think we are through that. I think something happened. Something was pierced. And especially after 4 years of what we've gone through on a national level, I think people have access now to information and to perspective. I want to kind of, is there another question, Leslie? Let me see. Maria, there was forgiveness given to Dylan Ruth. Do you feel this helps the healing? Let me talk about that. I didn't even finish because I got excited. How does one keep their spirituality after this horrific act? First of all, Black people, our spirituality is something so deep and ingrained. Even me, who no longer attends church, that spirituality is still within me in certain ways that'll never leave because it's a part of my Black identity, especially as the daughter of two Jim Crow refugees. But that rush to forgiveness, right? And that's how white supremacy kind of springs into action to help anesthetize folks and help kind of sedate folks. That rewarding Black people by saying, hey, you were exceptional because you were quiet, you were docile, you were compliant, you forgave. It was a backhanded compliment, and it did this thing, this reverse psychology thing, where it was validating us instead of empowering us to feel all the full complexities of emotion that we were entitled to. And this kind of goes back to what Courtney was trying to ask about healing spaces. I believe that the rage that we probably felt, like a lot of us felt, and the rage that we wanted to maybe articulate in the streets, I believe that was a form of self-care. It would have been justified, is my point, to come out there, the rage, the anger, and trying to create an outlet for that would have been justified and would have been therapeutic in a lot of ways to Black people. And what white supremacy tells you is that you need Black people to forgive the most vicious and most violent of white supremacists in order for progress to be made. And that's not how justice is achieved. It shouldn't even require our forgiveness. But the premium they put on that, Khalid, the premium they placed on, look at these Black people forgiving. And I was so happy to hear that one family was like, I ain't forgive. And no, they didn't write about that. They didn't put that out there. There was a few family members who was like, nah, this ain't it. And I don't want to, mishandle that trauma. And I don't want to speak for the families and spend too much time on them. But I do remember that there were dissenting opinions about that forgiveness. Go ahead and give your thoughts on that, Khalid.
Yeah, and just saying that the whole thought of forgiveness, people seem to think that, oh, that's so beautiful that the family would forgive him, but where is the accountability come in? Not just with Dylann Roof, but still the white supremacist practices in Charleston, call it all out at the same time. So when people think that, oh, it's so beautiful that they forgive, they think we can just go ahead and put it behind us and not talk about it again. And that's definitely not the case.
Make sure I'm off mute. And one thing that jumps out, and I say this all the time, and I might even tweet it without too much context, after something that reminds me of what transpired here back 5 years ago, is they took Dylann Roof to Burger King. After they apprehended him, they took him to Burger King, and they first of all, they apprehended him very peacefully. And not to say that I wanted them to enact any type of violence on him, but it definitely was very different from how Walter Scott was pursued for some warrants. This man, I mean not do that. This man walked into a church with a plot, with a manifesto, sat there, like you said, Khalid, for 45 minutes. And I remember seeing the Snapchat post that Twanza posted before, the youngest person, the young man that was in the church that was who had his life taken. I remember that Snapchat that he had posted that had a little sliver of Dylann Roof's body, that he was happy to have a new face in the church. And man, they took that person to Burger King, and that shows you, to me, somebody argued that was a police tactic. I don't believe that. Yeah, unfortunately, no one, that totally different response and reaction to that. Elizabeth, you wrote, compared to Louisville, which has had 120 plus days of active protesting and taking action in response to Breonna Taylor's murder. It's crazy to see the difference between how things are handled here versus other cities. Absolutely. And I think the question is a rhetorical question that I pose to anyone watching, is I wonder and I don't want us to ever suffer through another tragedy like the Mother Emanuel tragedy. But I wonder if something happened again, what would the response look like with folks now? And let me see who else is in here. Oh, Marie, is it Marie Kerr? Marie, you wrote about the response of the cops. You said the cops put their guns away and walked to the. Did they really? I never went back to watch the dash cam footage of the that apprehension. I remember high fives though. I remember the cops high fiving each other. But that's it. It was whiteness. Whiteness's way of telling Dylan Roof and others like him that he did okay. And now that's interesting because where we've seen this recently with the young Kyle, Kyle, what's his name? Not Limehouse, what's his name? The guy that took the long gun to Kenosha, and tragically murdered 2 protesters in Kenosha. Exactly that. He's now hailed. He's literally being hailed as a hero. And there are GoFundMe's and there are shirts and there are people really rallying to his defense and making him a hero. Rittenhouse, thank you. I love y'all. Thank you, April. Thank you, Carmen. Thank you, Elizabeth. You watch my lives, you know I'll go blank real quick. Thank you so much for having my back. But yeah, we're seeing. I made the argument that there are so many parallels between Dylan Roof and Kyle Rittenhouse. Rittenhouse is so many parallels between the two. Hey Donna, thank you. Everyone's chiming in. Thank y'all. Khalid, can you go to your second question? I would love to just jump into that real quick.
Yes. So, okay, and this is actually one of my favorite readings from the book. From the possessive investment in whiteness, how white people profit from identity politics. Lipsitz talks about applying racial labels to non-white groups in order to stigmatize and exploit them, while at the same time reserving extra value for whiteness. How is this evident in the lack of respect for Black professionals in Charleston, Latin and Hispanic professionals, and Indigenous professionals?
I'm going to read that again. I'm sorry, that question is...
It's loaded.
It's loaded. I want to... Okay. Is there any way to pull it up on the screen? Let me see. Is it too long? Because I'm going back and forth. Okay. Possessive investment of whiteness. Okay. Identity politics, non-white groups, stigmatize and exploit them at the same time. What made you come up with this question? You go in on this.
So I was reading, and let me actually turn because I feel like I wrote some notes in this, but I was reading it and
possessive of what? Yeah.
So it was.
Yeah.
Let me actually.
Yeah, this is on page 207.
207.
Mm-hmm. I'm gonna, as you look for it, I'm gonna read the Baldwin quote at the top. Okay. Blacks are often confronted in. Excuse me. Let me start over. Blacks are often confronted in American life with such devastating examples of the white descent from dignity. Devastating not only because the enormity of white pretensions, but because the swift and graceless descent would seem to indicate that white people have no principles whatsoever. I thought that was really interesting about white identity in itself, and the investment, like as the title of the George Lipsitz's piece kind of delves into the investment into whiteness. And I think what Baldwin is trying to do, I am so not trying to dissect too much Baldwin. I don't know if I have the bandwidth, but it really does beg the question about whiteness and how folks are so invested in that, the distinction and really what's behind it. I think once we challenge that and how they use that as an identity, it's so funny. I was reflecting on like I call people white all the time, and I don't think in Charleston, and I'm not tooting my own horn, but I don't hear anyone really calling white people out the way I do in terms of like white people this, white women that, like, and y'all don't see the DMs. I'm called racist so much just because of that. Like, it could be white people wear plaid. You're racist, and I'm like, why? And it took me so long, and it's so easy to understand, but it took me so long to figure out, oh, they don't like being called white. And there's something when a Black person kind of can identify that identity and kind of turn it on its head, because it's always meant they've always had this they are the rule, right? They've never had to call themselves that, but even though they profit from and enjoy whiteness, they don't necessarily consider. It's weird how when a Black person kind of jumps in there. Oh yeah, is it just me? I'm sorry. I was just reading. I'm so sorry. I was reading the notes. The chat section. All right, cool. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, and just because you said that, actually so this is like right in the second paragraph of this writing, he says, whiteness is everywhere in US culture, but it's very hard to see. As Richard Dyer suggests, white power secures its dominance by seeming not to be anything in particular. And so and that, really just explains it, because if you don't really have to say that you're in charge, or like how that whole thing, you can just show it. So by us calling it out, I think people take a lot of offense. Well,
yeah,
take a lot of offense to it.
I think that's what I was kind of stumbling through, was that it exists but it doesn't. I think the trick, the sleight of hand trick that they that folks who are very like committed to and invested in whiteness, I think the magic trick that they try to pull is that it's there and it has very real power and authority, but then it's almost like a gaslighting that, oh no, this is generic, or it's just the standard. It's just generally accepted. Courtney had a question. Let's see if we can bring Courtney in. You can help me be less garbled. I read that within the context of how whiteness wants to be perceived. Think of how right now lots of white folks want to be aggrieved or persecuted. That's impossible. You're in power. You're in a power position. It's so strange to me that white folks have a desire to both hold power and act put upon. Absolutely. They want to be oppressed so bad, right? As the meme says. Absolutely. I think, thank you, Courtney. That's why I love book clubs. Thank you for that. I think that is a really good observation about that. Hey, Evelyn, it's my girl. The invisibility of whiteness is possible by white being the default setting in society. Shout out to Evelyn. Thank you. Absolutely. Yeah, if we are invisible, we have the power of the cloak. Look at y'all. Y'all going out there and talking to y'all white folks. This is great. Shout out to D. D, you're amazing as well. Maria, what did you write? You're talking about cop still? Let me see. Cop culture is largely white and conservative. What do you see as the duty and burden of Black people police? I'm gonna just push back a little bit on that question, because we're not explicitly talking about law enforcement right now, and I only because I feel like Black people have been weighing in on that a lot. Like, I was watching the debates last night with Cunningham, and this whole like Black Lives Matter conversation kind of turned into explicitly talk about criminal justice and things of that nature. So I hear your question, but I'm going to table that question for now. That's just my instinct telling me to do that, because I think that's a tricky conversation too in Black communities about law enforcement. Donna England and Factor, my old boss, lack of resources, support, loans, coaching, mentoring, and public recognition for Black businesses, include startups, need to change. Thank you for that. I think that's a very an astute observation here in Charleston specifically. I was trying to look at your other questions, Khalid, and see if it remind myself of some other questions that might have come up. Khalid, read your fourth question. Read your third question for me, if you don't mind.
Yeah, because we kind of brought this up earlier. Ida B. Wells talks about the price tag of Black bodies in antebellum America in a red record, but then describes the loss of interest in Black bodies after emancipation and the rise in murders of Black people. Does the treatment of Black insurrection, political agency, and misrepresentation of Black bodies during Reconstruction differ today? Differ today. And just to touch on the misrepresentation of Black bodies, that's like painting Black men as over aggressive and hypersexualizing Black women, things like that, of that nature.
Yeah, and also too, I was watching a special on art. A lot of black bodies, black men and women were muses for certain like famous, renowned, world renowned artists in so many previous centuries, and but you'd never know them. They were painted white, um, or they were sketched as black people, and they were erased from that. I just thought that was important because the black body, like you just mentioned, is usually misrepresented as something that could not be beautiful, or graceful. It's interesting, coming out of emancipation, I think is a lot like how we came out of apartheid. And by apartheid, I mean Jim Crow. Um, I mean, coming out of the Civil War into the whole Emancipation Proclamation, I think the fact that we were granted certain new privileges as Black people, even though we hadn't fully realized citizenship, we weren't even given the right to vote. I think with those privileges came a different attitude toward what how we fit in. You laughing? How we fit in?
No, I see what you're trying to say.
Yeah, go ahead. You could.
Okay, so it just the control is over, right? So now I can't, I literally don't have the authority to keep Black people on my plantation. Mm-hmm. And now literally they can go free, mm-hmm. and they can kind of do whatever they want. So the loss of control is what bothers people. Mm-hmm. And that's something that kind of continues over and over again. So the same thing with segregation and
okay. You know what? I think I misinterpreted your question, but now I get it completely. So I think now I get it. Our usefulness too, right? It's tied so closely to labor. And what we saw here in South Carolina, as I used to highlight more often on Instagram, I used to resurrect these old articles where there were ordinances put in place where even though there were free Black women, especially Black women in Charleston, if you remember the Demar Vesey's Garden book, there were certain codes enacted against. There was something about a free Black woman wearing the color red, something about a free Black woman wearing bows, a free Black woman dancing, being loud. Think about that loud, raucous, joyful, joy-filled Black girl in our classes that's often punished and met with a lot of violence, right? There were ordinances put in place throughout the state of South Carolina that made it illegal for Black women to be idle. And what that illustrated for me was it showed me that there is no usefulness for our bodies if we're not producing labor for white wealth. So a woman, let's just say she had a husband who was the breadwinner, so to speak. If she wanted to be a housewife, she could not. I always wondered how come like people like my mom always worked. It was never an option. My mom never even contemplated being a stay-at-home mother. And now I get it, especially coming from the deep South. If she came from Eastern North Carolina, it was ingrained culturally because there were ordinances and laws put in place that kind of return us to that servitude, return us to another form of bondage, and because we were here purely for labor, and that's it. So they can't imagine us in a society where we are fully realized human beings who might want to be idle, as one of the articles pointed out. Yeah, go ahead, Khalid.
Yeah, and just think, so Ida B. Wells, like what she's writing just about like how literally there isn't a use for Black people anymore, and like they're just not. That I really like. I see. Like I have no interest, for you. You can't work on my. You can't. I mean, there's like sharecropping and all that. But when people are looking at Black people, they're just like, you have no use for me. And like now you have opportunities to be free and to be happy, and they don't like seeing that. So what they do is they invade the space. That kind of just comes back to how Mother Emanuel was treated, right. At its beginning.
We were, and I'll start wrapping this up. We were robbed of an ability to be seen as human after such a horrific tragedy. we were immediately, like, we were treated like children. We were immediately ushered. It's almost like, you know, when they wouldn't let you go to a funeral as a kid. Oh, you're too young. Like, because I've met parents since I've grown up who believe in taking their kids to funerals and some don't. But I always remember it felt like I remember me being, oh, you can't go to the funeral of your babysitter. You can't go to the funeral of your piano teacher. You can't, you know, it felt like they were keeping Black folks from the grieving process like children. And they infantilized us. I think that's the one thing, and maybe this is not the best dismount for this book, which is so rich. But I think that's the one thing I want to leave people with after having gone through this. And I really do hope people revisit the poems, the songs, the articles, especially my favorite one being where I learned about Lottie Gaffney on page 201. To speak when and where I can, African American women's political activism in South Carolina in the 1940s and 1950s. In that, what I saw was women, Black women, architecting a future for themselves by being politically active in a way that literally led the way to create reforms and to create policies that improve conditions for Black citizens in South Carolina. And what I'm trying to say about the Mother Emanuel massacre, we were robbed of an opportunity to not just mourn and feel the full complexities of emotions that come from surviving a terrorist attack. Shit, they didn't even use the word terrorist attack. That was debated. We were robbed of that information. He is too smart. He is. We were robbed of that experience. And so what that also kind of robbed us of was the ability to have thoughtful conversations that we led that helped, where we could help shape what justice would look like. That's where the reparations conversation, and they knew that. They knew that this can go into reparations, this can go into rights, more civil rights, this can go into schools desegregation, this can go into gentrification. They knew that the conversation could meander into all of those issues, all of those oppressive things that we contend with every day as Black citizens, as Gullah Geechee descendants. And so they knew that. White supremacy, and one thing we like to do, and we do this with Trump a lot, we keep demeaning and diminishing Trump and calling him an idiot. Well, we know he is an idiot, but what we also don't, what we downplay is that there is something savvy about what he's doing, and to us to kind of think as if he's just getting up and being, being aloof, we really are doing something a disservice, because white supremacy is very aware, and they'll stifle and stymie progress at every turn, and that the muting of the conversation about the Mother Emanuel massacre, the muzzling of Black people in emotion, really stymied a lot of progressive policies, a lot of progress in general. I don't want to make this about just lawmaking. It really just prevented a lot of progress from happening. And if we did throw a brick, if we did take to the streets, we would have been justified, more than justified. Like all the questions. Where was y'all questions at the beginning? All the questions that came cascading in there. I think right now what I want to do, Leslie Mack, 45 is a symptom of white supremacy, and he wields it very successfully. He's done it his whole life, literally. See Central Park 5, absolutely. And I know, Leslie, I wish you chime in more often. I'm always like nervous because she's so brilliant. She's so brilliant. I want to kind of just do a dismount now. It's my favorite word, Simone Biles. All right. So what we want to do is, I've already sent out. Please read the newsletter. All ticket holders receive up until 5:30, all ticket, or maybe 5:45, all ticket holders received a link to the Zoom discussion, just a little spillover. We can continue the conversation there, but I want to make sure that Courtney gets is able to not work as hard as she's working now. I want to be able to come to a close, and I want to remind folks that this month was a little difficult for me personally. Next month, however, is going to be sensational. this book club, this space, this community. The goal is to make it bigger, more expansive, to have more Black voices, not just as featured presenters, but as participants in this discussion. And I'm excited for us to dive into Spooklights and Spooklights 2. They're very small. They're very easy to read, very, very accessible. And I really want to encourage you to, I think that's for Courtney. Courtney did great. She's always great. I really want to encourage you all to please dig into Spooklights 1 and 2. Please watch Lovecraft Country if you can. It'll kind of prime you for Spooklights 1 and 2. Please keep engaged with the book club. I'm working very hard to put this together. Thank you, Elizabeth. You're my little cheerleader. And yeah, please support Khalid. Please continue to support this platform. And don't just come for the Southern Charm drama. Come for the dismantling of white supremacy that this city really needs. And so please follow me. Again, I sent the link out via email to the Zoom space. If you want to come and join me there, we can continue this discussion. But I want to end it there. I believe next month we're going to make this a bigger discussion, and hopefully we'll have a special guest. I can't say anything yet, but hopefully we'll have a special guest for October, and really want to open up this space and really start digging into seeing Black people in a different light, and seeing us not just through pain, which I believe that the first 2 selections were necessary, but this next one you're going to see us, as Nijeeah referenced, maybe with we're going to talk about Afrofuturism. We're going to talk about Black people, Black bodies, and in science fiction. And remember, this work, social justice work, is science fiction. We're reimagining worlds where justice could exist, and what we can imagine what equity looks like, and justice for everyone looks like. So I can't wait to jump into horror and sci-fi next month. What was the book choices one? The book choices. Thank you. I'm so happy. Yeah, I need to. This has like been a job reading all these books. So thank you all. I appreciate your support. Next month, get ready. This was a really tough month, tough week too. Boycott Southern Charm. Hashtag boycott Southern Charm. I love y'all. Meet y'all in Zoom. All right, take care.